And just like that, for the New Jersey Devils, the 2024-2025 NHL season came to a close on Tuesday night after they fell 5-4 to the Carolina Hurricanes in Game 5 of Round 1 of the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs. It's been a fun year, a tumultuous one, ups and downs. We're going to get into all of it right now. Daniel Rebane alongside myself, James Burley. Welcome, guys, to Puck on the Parkway. It's a nice little Friday evening here in the New York area, New Jersey area for both of us. And, well, I mean, let's get the sad stuff out of the way first. Dan, I'll ask you how you're doing, but I know there's bittersweet stuff in Devil's World right now.
Yeah, I think it's, I feel like for a while now we've known that this team wasn't a Stanley Cup contender. And it's kind of, finally settling in that, the season's over for the 2024-25 Devils. And it's a bit sad, but I feel like we've kind of, come to that already. We've already felt those emotions when Jack went down. I think that was the big point where we kind of knew, yeah, our season is probably running on fumes here. So I feel like that loss would have hit me a lot more if certain players were playing. Um, but yeah, I think, with what they were going through, it was just inevitable. And you got to tip your cap at a certain point to Carolina, who got it done in double overtime.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no mystery. Carolina kind of been the class of the Metropolitan Division for some time now. I think maybe they were a bit more vulnerable this year than they've been in previous seasons, but I mean, they just smothered the Devils in several aspects of the game. I mean, I think the special teams stuck out the most. The Devils going a goose egg on the power play the entire series obviously didn't help, but their power play showed up in ways that ours didn't, and our penalty kill was stretched a bit thin, especially with some of the injuries on the back end. We're going to get into all of that. I mean, let's particularly talk about, because games 1, 2, and even game 3 at this point, old news. Let's talk particularly about game 5 and just, I mean, with their backs against the wall, going into such a difficult place to play like the Lenovo Center, and there they are, 3-0 through 10 minutes, and you think at the very least this game will be tough, maybe, but they'll inch it over the finish line and they'll get another chance to play in front of their fans for a game 6, and it just didn't turn out that way. And I think maybe the turning point for a lot of people would be that penalty at the end of the first period that was given to Cody Glass. And I mean, some interesting refereeing decisions throughout the series, throughout the playoffs, as there always are. Playoff refereeing is so different because they call less, but they have to be that much more in tune. So they find maybe some more niche stuff. I mean, penalties was at the forefront of the game 5 discussion, and those who know what I'm talking about know, of course. I mean, it started with the Cody Glass penalty. I don't know if Carolina actually scored on that
Right
ensuing power
after,
play,
right
but yes,
after.
right after the power play concluded, they did score at the start of that first period, and then scored 2 more very quickly thereafter. And I think Markstrom would have wanted the second and third ones back, particularly. Um, they had a 5-on-3 later in that period when Nico Hischier made it 4-3 and they made it 4-4. And, there was some questionable embellishment
Questionable.
perhaps from
Oh,
Sebastian Aho on the trip, I believe that was,
Goss to spare before that.
and Gossespierre on the tie up with Cody Glass that went the other way. And, it bad bounces, but the Devils really just did not have an answer for the onslaught of pressure that came from the Hurricanes. Good refereeing decisions or not, that is the fact right there. And I think that Nico Hischier scoring that goal to make it 4-3 was a moment that stood out to me because they were getting battered that whole
Mhm.
game. I mean, after the first 18 minutes of the game, they were just getting shoved back down their end of the ice, and they found a way to eke back in front, if only for a minute. I thought that was inspiring, and I mean, they did really give it their all. And for what it's worth, Jacob Markstrom did struggle on a couple of those goals early in the game, but then he made 37 straight saves from the second period into double overtime. I mean, he was phenomenal. Kept the Devils in that game as long as they went. And of course, in that double overtime, there's a double minor issued against Dawson Mercer. Another controversial one. It looked really bad with the stick going into Jesperi Kotkaniemi's face, drew blood. And when that happens, they're going to give a double minor. Um, Question whether or not it was a follow through to the chip off the board. I mean, it certainly was a follow through. Whether or not that is you can adjudicate that as a penalty is still up for interpretation, it seems. And that's just how the cookie crumbles. Sometimes the decisions go against you, and you got to reap the benefits of that and face the consequences. And that is just what happened to the New Jersey Devils. I think when it came down to the goalie interference that would have been assessed to Timo Meier on Freddie Anderson in Game 4, and that was the big turning point, right? Kochetkov going in goal. Kochetkov, a good starter in his own right, was far worse than Frederik Andersen in Games 4 and 5 this series.
Yeah.
Really a big reason why the Devils had goals early in that game. They had a lot of pressure, but I think Kochetkov struggled. And the same reason why they scored, or at least why Timo Meier scored that goal he did in Game 4. But what the referees did do is they went 5-minute major, and then they can review it and downgrade it or nix out the penalty entirely. When the referees on the ice call the double minor, as they see fit, is their decision.
Reviewed it.
They reviewed it, but the only two cases when it's a double minor is it's either a double minor or you have to revoke it entirely. You can't downgrade it or upgrade it. I think that was maybe a judgment call that the refs could have made a bit better, but again, I think it would have been tough to give no penalty on that. Maybe 2 minutes, and I mean the Devils did especially well killing off the first 2 minutes of that double minor, and then the first bit of zone pressure that Carolina gets, they score. And Markstrom was rightfully very angry in his reaction to that as well, and I would have been too if I had played as well as he did. But that was all she wrote for the series.
Yeah, I think we'll try to spend as little time as possible on officiating because for the whole series leading up to that game, I didn't bring up officiating once in my day-to-day life. I was like, wow, this is actually a really good series. Officiating didn't pop up, especially like when you look at other series. Like officiating has been a problem in certain situations in different series. And then I text you. I was like, "Here we go. Here it is. This is where they want to pop up is in Game 5." And you might say it cost them, and it probably did cost them. But you can't use that as an excuse. I think even without those officiating decisions, Carolina might as well come back even without those power plays. I think we saw how the Devils played after that first period. And let's just talk about that first period for a second. I mean, that was probably the best first period I've seen all of 2025. Like, best period out of any period they played in 2025. I think that was probably their best one. They played perfectly defensively. All their pinches were right. They were playmaking. They were, Pesce. I mean, talk about Pesce. He's game time decision. He's got 2 assists in the first period.
Mm-hmm.
Especially that second one where he pinches off the wall, intercepts it, brings it down with his glove, and finds Timo Meier. I mean, it was just a perfect first period, and it just gave, I think, everybody hope that, hey, at least we'll get a Game 6. But that's not how everything goes, and hockey's hockey. So certain decisions go against you, certain decisions go for you. In Game 4, you got the decision where Timo Meier doesn't get a goalie interference kind of penalty. Obviously they don't win that, so it didn't really help them in the long run. But yeah, I think now that it's over, it's kind of tough, but at least we get to still watch some hockey. I'll say that. I've been enjoying some of these other series around the NHL, but yeah, special teams was the biggest thing, I think, to take away from the series, because I think the Devils played really good otherwise. They went toe-to-toe with one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference without Jack Hughes, without Luke Hughes, without a whole defensive core, like a whole healthy defensive core. 6 of their defensemen were injured or out in this series. So, I think you just got to tip your cap to whoever was playing in these games, like a Brian Dumoulin. I mean, he almost goes 40 minutes in Game 5 after playing almost 40 in Game 3. So, it sucks, but that's how it is. And the Devils got hit with all these injuries, and now they just have to come back, raring to go in September when training camp starts.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those injuries now, because I think it's germane to some of the topics we want to get into.
Yeah.
No Jack Hughes, and with the Devils, I mean, when they were healthy, when you turned into post-Christmas into 2025, they just weren't scoring enough goals. That was the biggest problem for this team, just not generating enough offense. Defensively, pretty sound in their structure for the most part. A couple lapses in games here and there. Goaltending, fantastic, even when Markstrom was injured, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty fair to say that the issue was very identifiable. And then you lose your best scorer. Tough to then bounce back against one of the toughest, I mean, 200-foot teams in Carolina, right? They're not a team that is easy to score against. And certainly not when they have the penalty kill flying like they did.
Yeah.
Ironically enough, the Devils' power play was even better when Jack Hughes was off the ice. I think that's more coincidental than anything. I think part of that was Timo Meier being able to put him up from power play 2 to power play 1 is a pretty good substitute to have. So I don't think they really missed much losing Jack. I think they missed a lot losing Luke on that power play. Not having him to quarterback the power play was a bit of a problem. I think it was noticeable that Dougie Hamilton was still coming back from injury.
Oh, easily.
And
easily.
A lot of he's one of many, right? Like we talked about Pesci coming back not at 100%. Hamilton, we're not even talking about the fact that he wasn't at 100%, but he was not. Nope. Siegenthaler obviously came into
He's still in rehab, by the way.
Yeah.
He's still rehabbing his injury, and he played all those minutes. So
Siegenthaler came into game 3 on a minutes restriction, and then it went into double overtime, and he played 26 minutes or thereabouts. And, you know, that's another one. Kovacevic, gone. Dylan, gone.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus. Knee injury for Kovacevic out of nowhere. Like, nobody even saw. He just left the game, and then you're like, oh, here we go again.
Right.
And he's not even going to be back for the start of next season. So
nope. And he's a guy that is going to be here long term. We know that with the extension he signed in March. So that's another tough blow for New Jersey, even to start next season. But the positives that came with this, because there's always positives when you dig deep, was the amazing play of Brian Dumoulin and Simon Nemec. And I will also give some credit for Seamus Casey coming in and playing strongly in Game 5 the way he did, quarterbacking the power play, which, by the way, we didn't get a power play goal, but we scored 4 seconds or so after the power play expired. It technically counts.
Yeah.
Stefan Nason net front. There's a power play written all over that type of goal. So I got to give Casey some credit where it's due too, but Nemec especially and Brian Dumoulin. And I will say there has been a lot of criticism dictated towards the direction of Tom Fitzgerald, and some of it rightfully so for how he approached the deadline. He proved me wrong bringing in Brian Dumoulin. I'm not sure exactly what we said, but if we went back a few episodes,
both of us wrong.
I think we were both a little bit cynical. Like, why do we need another defensive defenseman? But I think Dumoulin was not only great eating up the minutes that other players could not, but he did it well. He was a leader back there, not just defensively in terms of, you know, winning battles in the corner, being responsible in front of the net. I thought he moved the puck up the ice better than any other defenseman we had this series, except for maybe Pesci. And the one thing that Nemec brought that the team was gravely missing with both Luke and Jack missing was zone entry.
Yep.
The only 2 players who I really was confident in zone entry this series was Hischier and Bratt, and then you added Nemec. And then to a degree, I think Dawson Mercer was okay in the zone entry. I think Mercer, you know, for the bit of an underwhelming couple of seasons he's had now, I thought had a decent series as well. Next to obviously the big guys, Bratt, Meier, Nico Hischier, of course, showing up, Pesci, Brian Dumoulin showing up, Nemec showing up, and then of course the goaltending was there. So you got a pretty decent core there, Dan, including taking into account the injuries on your blue line, missing your best scorer. Your top guys all showed up, and then you had a couple of secondary guys who I thought were solid. I thought, you know, Nason in the later part of the series started playing better. Mercer, decent secondary guy. I thought Palat was pretty good in some of the intangibles, but I mean, he's still not ever really going to live up to that price tag, unfortunately. But he's proved that he could be a serviceable third line or so guy. So, I mean, let's talk about a couple of those things. Dumoulin and Nemec being real horses and stepping up. Nemec showing that he belongs at the NHL level and can be a force for this team moving forward, even if there are still a couple of kinks to work out and consistency being an issue. And then to mention some of the issues with the depth, because it certainly wasn't there enough.
Yeah, I think, you know, this series showed that the Devils have a good problem when you look at the defensive court, because, you know, obviously fully healthy next year, I think you got probably 8 or 9 guys, especially if you bring back Brian Dumoulin, which we'll probably talk about possibly later in a different episode. But Yeah, I think Kovacevic is not going to be here to start the season next year. So, Simon Nemec has an opportunity to run with what Kovacevic had this year at the beginning of the season. So I think that's a positive for him to go into this summer, come back healthy. Don't get injured in international play. But I think there is a spot for him to grab. And then Dumoulin, I think, I didn't expect this much from him. I expected, he'll be a solid, third pairing guy. But he showed if needed, he can be that, minutes eater, and he did it well. I mean, he, was clearing the net, penalty kill when he was on. I thought was pretty good. Um, I think he was just an overall solid acquisition, and for a second round pick, when you're finding defensemen like that for playoff runs, especially with the experience he's had winning 2 cups with Pittsburgh. I think that is a must have in a locker room. And I think it's going to be hard for Tom Fitzgerald to just let him walk out that door to free agency. I think he's got to find a way to get him re-signed, at least for another year, maybe two. Get a 2 year deal or something, because you know with Kovacevic going to start the year on LTIR, most likely with his knee injury. Brendan Dillon has a neck injury. Like, sure, he says he's fine now, but let me see him in September, all 100% healthy, because neck injuries are scary. It could be fine right now, but next week he could be, you know, not able to get out of bed. So, I think those are like the two biggest question marks on the back end heading into training camp next year. So I don't think it's bad to have more bodies than you need. So again, I think it's going to be hard for Tom Fitzgerald to let Dumoulin go the way he played in this playoffs. So um, it's going to be interesting to see how he goes into negotiations with that, if he actually wants to bring him back or not. But if it was me, I'd bring him back any day.
Yeah, and I think especially when you think about sort of the extra defensemen that the Devils have. Let's assume that all six, right, of the guys that started this season are healthy because they're all contracted, are
Yeah,
healthy to come back in and start the season. You've got Dougie, Kovacevic, and Pesci on the right side. You've got Luke, um,
Siegenthaler.
the Siegenthaler, and Brendan Dillon on the left side.
Hmm.
Your two extras, theoretically, not including the UFAs, are Seamus Casey and Simone Nemec. I mean, also they've got to get a deal to Luke Hughes, of course, but assuming that those five and Luke Hughes and then Casey and Nemitz are there, another left-handed guy could be really important to have on this team. Not that Nemitz especially and Casey they both proven that they can play on the left side. Nemitz, of course, a little better two ways, I would say, than Casey has proven to be. Casey's still, a year or two behind in
Yeah.
developing his NHL game, right? Um, I mean, I think Brian Dumoulin played his way into deserving a contract. The only question is, where's the space?
Hmm.
I know you have. I take it since Tuesday night, since the Devils were eliminated. I've taken a look at Puckopedia and I've tried to figure out what the hell Tom Fitzgerald could do in this offseason and how he would go about restructuring the team and addressing the needs that they really have entirely in the forward core. And it's hard. It's hard to figure out
Yeah.
what pieces they could move because Luke Hughes is going to get money, right?
Yep.
If it's a bridge deal, that's good, but he's going to get money one way or another down the line. Dillon is contracted at 4 million. Kovacevic, maybe he'll be LTIR, but that's another 4 million. Pesci is contracted. Siegenthaler is there, and then Dougie, of course, he's got 3 more years on the $9 million deal. I mean, we can talk. We have plenty of time to talk about speculative moves this offseason, but looking at the shape of this team defensively, there's not much room to work with in terms of how you bring guys in. If Brian Dumoulin's a guy that you want to sign, and I think he's fully earned it, and I'd feel a lot more comfortable with him as an option, even if it's the seventh D sometimes. Even
Yeah.
if he's health bomb, I would feel a lot more comfortable if he was available. What's the answer then moving forward if you want to go get a guy like a Brock Besser in free agency to beef up the scoring in the top six, or want to get a third line, fourth line down the middle to beef things up because that's an area of need as well. I don't know. I don't know how you see it. I feel like this is going to be I think it's really likely that we might see a big member of the New Jersey Devils sent the other way in a trade to make room for this type of signing.
Yeah, I think it's, I live on Puckpedia like every day trying to figure out, different situations that the Devils and Tom Fitzgerald could go. But, you bring up trades. I think that's the only way to kind of, reshape that bottom six, especially because, Eric Hollis got 1 year left. He's only got a six team no trade clause. So he's probably on the move if you want to get off that 3 million and get a, I'd say, more solidified winger, because when he was signed he was supposed to be the third center or
Mm-hmm.
play next to Jack Hughes. And when he's playing on that top six on the wing of a play driver, he doesn't look out of place. But for his contract, where they want him to slot in on that third line, it just hasn't worked out.
Mm-hmm.
So you got him. Then you have Palat. It's going to be hard to move him because, you know, I actually got confused. I thought he had a 10-team no trade. He actually has a 10-team trade clause. So he can only be traded to 10 certain teams that he picks.
Do we know which 10 teams they are?
No, we do not. So it's going to be interesting. I think if you can't trade him, I think he's bought out. And it's gonna be tough for at least this year. I mean, because I think his buyout for this year was like three and a half or something along the line, and then it goes down the next 3 years. But yeah, I think Tom Fitzgerald has a big job ahead of him to try to reshape this bottom six, because I think they have a couple of guys that they keep around, like a Paul Cotter, like a Cody Glass. I think Cody Glass probably in an ideal world is your fourth line center next year, and you can find a better option to be a 3C that can play up on that second line if one of your big boys go down. So yeah, man, it's going to be tough. Obviously you're already bringing in Arseny Gritsyuk in
Yep.
for the middle six, so that's a good piece to add there. But yeah, I think once we kind of get deeper into the playoffs and more focused on the Devils off season, we'll find more names that could probably become available. But I think defensively they're set. The only, discussion point is Brian Dumoulin, if you bring him back or not. And then goaltending, I think we should talk about this more.
Yeah.
Markstrom's only got 1 year left and he's eligible for extension. If I'm Tom Fitzgerald, I try to get that extension done as soon as possible.
I mean, there's a few things there. Cody Glass, of course, an RFA,
Mm.
so they'd have to,
Well,
stri-
I'll say this. He's not gonna get a qualifying offer because his qualifying offer is 2.5 million. Not worth that. So
yeah.
he won't get qualified. But I think the Devils find a way to re-sign him. I think Cody Glass um has a place on this team. I think he wants to be here. He said his wife loves it in New Jersey. So I think there's a deal to be had at a lower number, maybe in between 1 and 1.5 million for a year or two. So we'll
I
see
believe
on
that
that.
I
But
believe
yeah,
that that's also arbitration eligible, and I should that go to arbitration, I think
well, if he doesn't get qualified, he becomes a UFA. So
yeah, I think there's a chance that there's it would likely favor the Devils going for a lower number than the qualifying would suggest. I think Hala is such an interesting place to start because he's got the 1 year left. Underwhelmed, particularly this year and last. I mean, played with injury last year. This year just looked a bit like a passenger, too much for the role that he's expected to have, making more than 3 million. I think he's kind of your prototypical fourth center in terms of the type of player that he is right now. He's just not, for me, good enough to be the three center where he, sometimes is going to be tasked with playing with a Jack Hughes. I think that worked a couple seasons ago. And I know he's an important leader to have in that dressing room, but on that contract, it just feels like, considering where they're spending some of their money right now, just it's not $3 million they can afford to spend on a fourth line center. I think he's a guy who might be on his way out. Um, the idea to buy out Palat, do we know what it's no longer going to cost 3.5? What would it cost moving forward for them to buy out Palat? Is that something we know
well,
or
so next year the hit would be, I think it's 3.5 or like 3.8, whatever, extra numbers behind that. Then it
Hmm.
goes down to 2.5, and then the last 2 years of it would be like 1.8 each year. So with the cap going up, um, I think
Could be
it's
worth
do
it
it probably it would suck to do it. I mean, it would suck for next
for
year,
Andre. Yeah.
but with the cap going up the way it is, and I'm not particularly okay with sending out certain assets to try to trade him out, but with his 10-team trade clause, I mean, nobody's
And
gonna
I'm
take even at half retained at 3.5, 3 mil. I don't know many teams, looking for a cup winner that probably want Palat unless they can get him for, less than that. And that's probably the Devils' biggest problem is finding a taker. So if they're I don't see a world where he comes back next year on his $6 million AAV. So I think the likelihood of a buyout is more than being able to trade him at this point.
I think it might be worth it to just financially to get things done. And I I don't know where they go from here. I really don't. I think they're in such a precarious situation in terms of the money. Really, I think we're gonna potentially see a big name New Jersey Devil. I mean, consider this what you call a big name. I think the likelihood of Dawson Mercer not being a New Jersey Devil next year, I think rises tremendously.
I think that's a big possibility. Yeah.
I think the likelihood of Dougie Hamilton being part of a trade rises tremendously. I mean, think about monetarily what that would free up. I
I
know
mean,
that's a big loss.
he's also got the 10-team trade list, so as Palat. So
Right.
again, it's just finding a team that is willing to take on a deal like that because he's got 3 years left, I
Hmm.
believe. So, you know, it's going to be hard. So that's why Tom Fitzgerald's the GM. He's just got to figure this out. He's got to figure out how to build this team the way he wants. Um, and there are going to have to be some tough decisions made this summer.
Yeah, and I think the discourse on Fitzgerald has been split, right? Like he's done really well securing the contracts for a lot of these guys. I think that much is very, very true. But now with the criticism he's gotten from the trade deadline and this past season, I think this is make or break for Tom Fitzgerald in terms of his legacy as the Devils GM and whether or not the team is going to find success moving forward. Because I think it's pretty clear this roster, a healthy Jack Hughes, a healthy blue line alike, was not prepared to be a cup winner. There needed to be work to address in the bottom six and perhaps one more scorer in the top six. I think that much was evident.
Yeah.
So he's got to deliver on that. And I think the Devils' window is win now. If that is not what they are able to achieve moving forward, I think it's time to start ramping up the criticism on Fitzgerald because I think he's earned some of it, but I think he's done some good things. This offseason is going to be the barometer for Fitzy.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be the off season where he finds his seat very hot. Obviously he's got to rebuild that bottom six. And it's gonna be hard to build that. I think he's gonna have to do it through a couple of trades. I think, not the best free agency this year. Obviously, you got Mitch Marner at the top, but obviously the Devils aren't going to be in that with him looking for 14 million. Maybe a Nikolai Ehlers from Winnipeg.
Ehlers would be a great get, but it's again pricey as well.
Yeah, that's going to be up in the high sevens, probably low eights. So yeah, so it's going to be he's got a tough job. I don't envy him, but if he makes some moves and they bust like they did this offseason, like with Brendan Dillon, no offense, I don't think he's worth that 4 million. I don't think most people thought he was worth that 4 million when he first signed. And now you're locked in for 2 more years. I think that's the type of decision that could hurt you in the long run. And so far, you know, looking back at it, that's probably a big move that probably shouldn't have been done.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good place to shift gears. Obviously, we'll be in tune on what the Devils do this offseason, watching very, very closely. I'm making my mock offseason
Yeah.
transactions on Puckopedia. And I love the community on there, actually. I'm getting feedback as well in the comments. It's been a lot of fun. So I think it's a good time to talk about some of the exit interviews we saw. I think there was a couple common themes throughout. And the greatest theme was obviously positivity.
Mm.
I was I was very happy to see how, you know, glowingly everyone was talking about one another. I think some were receiving more praise than others, of course, but I compare that to other teams that, you know, I see clips from exit interviews. There's more vitriol. I mean, obviously, this team made the playoffs. Most of those teams did not.
Yeah.
But this was especially felt like a family in a way that I haven't felt with the Devils in at least a little while. And for a team that struggled as well, there was some blunt honesty. Guys like Eric Halla and several others saying this team, Brett Pesce, this team is too good to be a first round exit. The expectation should be playoffs. We have to do more. I thought that honesty was refreshing. The constant glowing remarks for Nico Hischier from Brett Pesce especially was like, you know, this guy's good, but when you come and you see him day in and day out, you just see how important he is. He's a quieter guy. Cody Glass was saying this, but when he speaks, everyone listens. And then I'm not sure who it was. I believe it. Who was asked which player impressed them the most in their first year, and then they said it was Jack.
Oh yeah, yeah. I forget who it was. It was one of the new guys. Yeah, he was talking
Was
about.
it Markstrom or it was I think it was Jake Allen.
Yeah, yeah. He was talking about Jack's perception from the outside, and he's like,
Right.
obviously he's a skilled player and all that, and he's good. But once you see him on the inside, he said that Jack knows he's the face of this franchise, and he doesn't take that
Mm-hmm.
lightly. And I think that was a great quote to come out of exit interviews. Like Jack's not happy with how things went. With his injury, with how things unfolded after the Christmas break. Like he puts all that pressure on his shoulders, and it sucked that he wasn't here in the playoffs because if he's here, I think Devils are in a different situation. I think obviously we didn't think they would be good enough to win the cup with him, but I think they could have gotten a series win with him if he was there. But I like to hear that Jack looks at himself as the guy, like the face of the franchise. Obviously, you have Captain Nico Hischier, and he takes that responsibility, to heart. But then when you got a guy like Jack Hughes who knows he's the guy, I think that's good to see going forward because this team knows they're good. I think everybody said that yeah, we got the pieces. It's just we have to tweak some things here and there. And Brett Pesce, playoffs aren't the expectations. Winning the Stanley Cup, that's the
Mm-hmm.
real expectation. So some of those quotes to come out of exit interviews, I'm really happy with. And I just can't wait till September rolls around and see what this team looks like because I think they've got the core pieces. They just need to build around that core.
All right, before we give our summing remarks on what this season was, give me a name, any name, player that you'd like to see the New Jersey Devils go after this offseason. Just one. Just a fun one.
Do you have to ask me?
I don't
I
have to. I can
I
go
mean
first.
I'll say a name, but it's a pretty obvious name.
Are you going to say Quinn Hughes?
Of course, I'm gonna say Clint
Yeah.
Hughes, especially
And
after
we have to talk about it. We have to.
especially after Jim Rutherford's comments again today. I mean, like
Dude, the guy
he
is a
just,
clown. It's
I
so
mean,
funny.
he's just the gift that keeps on giving. I mean,
Yeah.
first he says, I tried to call Quinn after Rick Tocchet
He
said he
doesn't
was.
want to talk to me.
He didn't call me
Face of
back.
our franchise doesn't want to talk to me.
And now he
Captain.
said, and then today he's like,
Crazy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He said his phone died while golfing. Yeah, all right, buddy. He was definitely not at the Nick game. So yeah, I think if Quinn's really available, which it certainly looks that way based on the comments coming out of that front office out in Vancouver. Like they are really, you know, I don't even know what it sounds like they're really just throwing him under the bus, kind of being like he might not want to be here, guys. So we're kind of just trying to prepare you for that. And they just keep negatively talking about him and keep bringing it up. Like they should just be letting this die at this point, but they just keep building it up, keep building it up. So I think this is kind of like the
Yeah.
JT Miller, Elias Pettersson thing. I think this is just unnecessary noise, and eventually it's going to seep into that locker room. And I think eventually he's going to request a trade, and maybe that happens as early as this summer.
Dude, that would be insane.
But I think that's the one guy. If I said to go after, it'd be Quinn Hughes. But
Yeah, and that's my answer too. I mean, I did mention Brock Besser before. Obviously, he's going to be a free agent, has that top six scoring acumen that they should be looking for. but I don't know if they can afford a player like that with what they've got going on this
I'll
summer.
I'll say just to be a bit different. I'd go after Alex Tuck from Buffalo.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's a good
I
one.
think I think if you're looking, for a good contract value, I think he still has 1 year left on his deal. And the way he kind of plays with his size, he's not per se like he doesn't play like he's 6'4" per se, but he's a big guy. He still uses his body to score goals. I believe he had 30 goals this year. So
Hmm.
I think the Devils could use another big body goal scorer that can play. It's not like he's a scrub. He's not slow or anything. He's just a really good hockey player that has size to him. And I think the Devils need one more guy like that, especially with Timo Meier being the main villain this playoff series. I think they need another type of guy like that. And he's a right-handed shot. Devils don't have many of those. So
That's why I like Besser over Nikolai Ehlers. I think one, he might be a little bit more affordable, and a right shot might help out a little bit more. But I think Alex Tuck is a guy who can would fit in the middle six as well. Can taxi between the third and second line, and if the second line's not or third line's not producing, drop him down, play him next to a Stefan Nason type, and you try to get those two guys going together and see what that's all about. I mean, I there's a lot of directions they can go. We can only speculate now. Just thought I'd have a little bit of fun with that one. Um, yeah, let's take a quick minute to give the Devils a final funeral for this season. Um, I'm glad you said that the first period against Carolina was the best period we had in 2025, because that is true, but it wouldn't be true. It wouldn't be true if we had also included the beginning portion of the season that went through 2024 in the equation,
yeah,
because that's the standard. That team got me thinking a cup run. Maybe
no,
not the
yeah,
maybe not the Stanley Cup, but an Eastern Conference final, maybe Stanley Cup final, good enough team to beat anybody in the conference and stand up against anybody in the National Hockey League on their day. A
yeah.
top five team in the league, no doubt.
Mhm.
Then something changed, and they didn't have that anymore. Some of the goals just dried up a little bit. They weren't as free flowing. And I'm sure it'd be tough to pinpoint what reason that happened, but I think it did expose that we were getting too much success from supporting guys. And then once that started to go by the wayside a little bit, it became pretty clear that there were 4 or 5 forwards at any given moment that you could rely on to move the offense, and then 6 or 7 passengers. Of course, I'm referring to Jack, Jesper, Timo, and Nico as the guys who really moved the needle. And then at times you had Mercer there, you had Nason there, you had Cotter, you had Palat in a couple moments in the back half of the season. But particularly Nason and Cotter not flying out of the gates, being fantastic. Nason career year. Couldn't have asked for better from him. But when the goals started to dry up a little bit post Christmas, going into January, I think that was really when it got exposed that there was a gap in talent in this roster. Because the defense never stopped being good. Players came in and out off the blue line, injuries here and there. Defense was good, goaltending was good. It was the forwards. I think that is ultimately my biggest takeaway. My next biggest takeaway is that the New York Rangers did not score a single goal at the Prudential Center. Couple of shutout wins. Jacob Markstrom loves that rivalry. I'm here for it. Yeah, and my last sales pitch to Tom Fitzgerald: retool the bottom six. If you have to send away a big name to do it, maybe you gotta. Hopefully, it's not one of those big forwards. I'd rather it be maybe a Dougie Hamilton, if possible. I know I love Dougie, but we got more cover on the blue line than we do up front right now. And if Markstrom is really interested in that extension, give it to him, because he's not that expensive for what we got out of him, and we got an elite goaltender. And I'm gonna miss Jake Allen. That's my final piece. And Nico, you're him. Can't believe that guy is not nominated for the Selke Trophy. Well, I don't know why Sam Reinhart needs to be there when Barkov's already there. Anthony Cirelli is good as well. And you know what? While I don't have to say anything nice about the Carolina Hurricanes right now, Seth Jarvis was duped out of a nomination as well. I think Barkov, Hischier, Jarvis would have been my nomination for Selke this year. But that's just me. And that's my final thoughts.
Yeah, I'll step in. My biggest takeaway is that, the Devils core guys, they're made for the playoffs. I think they showed that with this series, you know, missing key guys everywhere on the ice. We saw Timo Meyer step up. He showed what he can be when the playoffs and the bright lights shine. I mean, he's that power forward that the Devils kind of missed. Certain shots he should have probably scored earlier in the series didn't go in, but every game he was getting better and better. I think he was probably the Devils' best forward on the ice the whole series combined. I think Nico Hischier right behind him. He was excellent. I mean, 4 goals in 5 games. What a performance from the captain. I mean, I think what game 5, I think he took almost 50 faceoffs. So they leaned on him. Jesper Bratt showed he's a gamer too. I think that's the main takeaway from this is that the Devils got it right with their big guys, but they really need to get them some, bottom of the lineup, 7, 8, 9 hitters type players. They need those guys to step up and probably need some fresh blood. There's a couple guys down there right now that are, we should keep, but I think they need some more heavy hitters down in the lineup. So we'll see who they go after. And then goaltending, I think, Markstrom after his injury, it was clear that he was missing something. But once the playoffs started, man, he clocked right back in. Other than that second period in game 5, I feel like he was amazing. I think he, gave the Devils every chance to win certain games. And, goal scoring let him down. So if you're able to get him on a contract extension, I'd do that in a heartbeat. He's made for this. He's made for New Jersey and how they kind of play because we saw a top 3 defense. I mean, top 3 penalty kill. It might not have looked like that in the playoffs, but man, I
You
think
got to stop taking penalties, man, if you don't want your penalty killers to be so tired.
yeah. So there's a lot of positives. Simone Nemec is if he's playing like he did in the
Stock up.
playoffs, if he's playing every game that he did like he did in this playoffs, I think he's one of the guys going forward. It's just about consistency for him. Can he kind of translate what he did in this playoffs, take that momentum, and head into next year? So I can't wait till the summer. We got a lot of time ahead of us to kind of think about building this roster and what we would do. But that's Tom Fitzgerald's job. He's the one making the money, making all those decisions. So September can't get here fast enough. I'll say that. So it sucks to watch other teams compete in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but I love watching hockey, so that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and you mentioned Nemitz toward the end there, and I will say the atmosphere at Game 3 of the playoffs and being there in the building and around everybody when that game went on, the loudest I've heard the Rock in a long time, and that was special. And that game alone, memories that are going to last a lifetime. So even in a season that might be a little bit underwhelming, maybe they fell short of expectations, had to deal with too much adversity. There's still a lot of silver linings there, and that's why we do
just
this.
the beginning.
That's why we love the team.
This is just the beginning. I'll say that.
This is the start of a big project of a team that hopefully will be close to Stanley Cup glory very, very soon. I think that's a good time to wrap things up. We will, of course, be back on Puck on the Parkway to talk about this very, very big offseason that's coming up for the New Jersey Devils. And hey, maybe we talk about some teams that are still currently playing hockey. Although for me, hockey season ended on Tuesday night. So for Daniel Revan, I've been James Worley. Thank you so much for tuning in all season. Now, this is the first full season we've had covering the team. We started this last offseason, I believe. So
yeah,
I mean, this has been a lot of fun. Or no, wait, this is season 2.
Yeah, this is season 2.
This is season 2. 2 off seasons ago.
I didn't want to.
We're coming up. No, I tripped over myself. We're coming up on 2 years of the show. So thank you so much for supporting, and we will be back hopefully with some good and exciting news about the Devils this offseason. Thanks so much for watching Puck on the Parkway, guys.